Hello, everyone around the world, and welcome to another episode of the IEEE Power and Energy Society Student Podcast. This is our monthly conversation with guests that inspire us, speak from experience, and drive innovation. I'm your host, Clinton Gadet. I'm a third-year electrical engineering student at BCIT in Vancouver, Canada. The team behind this podcast consists of our producer, Priya Mana, our graphic designer and social media coordinator, Shani Lin, our marketing and publicity leader, Augusto Zanin, our editors, Adamir and Paul Nieto, and our mentors and executive producers, Hasala and Conrad Schmidt. As always, this podcast is made for you, the students, and the young professionals around the world. So please be brave and ask your questions in the chat or ask to be unmuted and speak with us directly. Don't be shy. That's what we're here for. And without further ado, it is an honor to introduce our guest this evening, Dr. Massoud Amin. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Clinton. The honor is mine, honored to be here. And thank you and the colleagues you mentioned, Hasala, Conrad, and Shani for their leadership and making this happen. Thank you.
They really, really do so much work. I really am so grateful for them. They're like, it takes a lot. It takes a lot, and we're lucky to have a good, cohesive team. I would like to give the audience a little bit of background on yourself, sir. So I'll read your bio. Dr. Massoud Amin, IEEE and ASME Fellow, is a professor of electrical and computer engineering and a University Distinguished Teaching Professor Award recipient at the University of Minnesota. He is widely credited as being the father of the smart grid and a cyber-physical security leader who led the development of 24 technologies transferred to industry and directed all security-related R&D for North American utilities after the 9/11 tragedies. His focus is on efficiency, security, reliability, resilience, and sustainability of complex interdependent systems. These include power and energy, defense systems and logistics, and intelligent transportation systems. He is the chairman emeritus of the IEEE Smart Grid, and from June 2010 to August 2017 was a member of the Texas Reliability Entity as board chairman, utility industry regional entity that oversees reliability of the ERCOT region. From January 2013 to August 2017, he also served as a board member of the Midwest Reliability Organization, which oversees MISO. Previously, Dr. Amin was with the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, in Palo Alto, California, from January 1998 to 2003, where he pioneered R&D in smart grids in 1998 and led the development of 24 technologies that transferred to industry. He also served on the Board of Infrastructure and the Constructed Environment at the U.S. National Academy of Engineering, and on the Board of Mathematical Sciences and Applications at the National Academy of Sciences. Welcome, Dr. Amin.
Thank you. After that generous introduction, thank you, Clinton. I should just say thank you, goodbye. I better stop there because after whatever I say, I will debunk all my bio that you read. Thank you so much.
You know, actually, I left a lot out of your bio, to be honest, sir. There's so much more to talk about, and maybe to really give some perspective to the young people attending today. What was it like when you first came into this career? What kind of sparked your mind to get into electrical networking and that studies at the very first moment?
Thank you for asking. I'm just a happy geek on a mission. My mission is powering progress and developing leaders to enable powering that progress, removing whatever obstacles that may impede our civilization, our quality of life, that as humanity we sometimes we take for granted. My first glimpse at why power and energy was actually very unusual, and I believe several of the colleagues on this interview probably know that. As a small kid, my parents were both medical doctors in Iran. My maternal grandfather had founded the Red Cross in Iran. So as a kid, my parents would do volunteer work in villages outside of my hometown of Tabriz. We would go to villages as a 5-6-year-old. I'm the youngest of 4. And I would see women had died in their 30s trying to give birth to children. The reason for that was, of course, lack of medical facilities, lack of access to medicine, but underpinning that was lack of access to clean water. And underpinning water was access to electricity, lighting, refrigeration, water. So even though my strength were in humanities, social sciences, biological sciences, I forced myself to become good in math, physics, physical sciences, with the objective of actually as a small kid, my parents, patients, family would ask, so Massoud, what do you want to do where you grow up? I would say I want to bring light where there's darkness. And they would laugh. You want to be a theologian? I would say, no, 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 no. I would point to the light, say that. Oh, you want to be an electrician? Yes. So that's my beginning as a small kid. And I was a shy, stuttering, skinny kid from age 4 to 16. I stuttered. And even now, when I'm really tired, I do stutter. So it's a hint to all of the folks out there who may have areas that they feel they will never develop into a great engineer or a solid engineer. You have much more potential than I ever did. So my hat is off to you, and I think all of you, if you follow your passion, you will succeed. And we are at your service. Just a happy geek on a mission.
It's been a very varied mission. It's been and I was doing some research, and from 1982 to 1990, you went from a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering all the way to a Doctorate of Science in Systems and Mathematics with your PhD. Which people and like what events were turning points that led you down that path to keep pursuing to a higher level? Like you didn't stop at you weren't satisfied, it seemed.
Thank you. I was always a curious person, always wanted to learn. And I think my parents, more than anything else, my very first mentors were my parents, my older siblings also. And then I had so many amazing classmates, so many great teachers, great mentors, coaches in soccer, in basketball back in Iran. And then when I moved to New York in 1978 for senior year high school, Cornwall on Hudson there. And I had undergraduate professors at University of Massachusetts that inspired me. Professor Ted Jafferis, who became dean later on of School of Engineering at University of Massachusetts, I took 5 courses with him as an undergrad. Circuits 1 and 2, controls 1 and 2, and a signal processing class. Actually, sorry, a probability and stochastic class. And I did my master's thesis with him on a helicopter for Sikorsky. He was maybe the 3rd big mentor. And then my doctoral dissertation advisor, Professor Erwin Rodin at Washington University, he was a huge force of positivity in my life. He would never challenge your thinking. Instead, he would help you think. He would never say no. Instead of telling you, I was a happy kid, a happy geek, I would go to him with all kinds of crazy ideas from age 24 to even 36, 37. He wouldn't say no. He would say, Massoud, in a gentle way, have you considered? What he would say, have you considered, was the beginning of a whole new bifurcation, new thinking that I could get. Then at EPRI, at Electric Power Research Institute, Chauncey Starr, who was the founder of EPRI, before that Manhattan Project, a pioneer in peaceful use of nuclear power, one of the 3 names on the patent for nuclear reactors, and father of area of risk management, risk assessment, and then dean in his older life, dean of School of Engineering at UCLA, and then president, founder of EPRI, was huge. He was a systems thinker, big thinker. He could go deep, but he could also see wide. So I've been very blessed. I've had so many amazing people. Even now, I learned so much, honestly, at every level, from my students, from my colleagues, from my mentors, at every level. I use every opportunity like that happy geek to learn from every direction I can.
What was it like to go into that like truly high stakes role at EPRI? Like this is before that, did you have some roles that helped you transition, or did you kind of trial by fire have to learn it?
Combination of the two. I had been a professor, assistant and associate professor of system science and math. After my doctorate, I stayed at Washington University and got my green card and citizenship through my work for them and for the US Air Force. I had a lot of projects with industry. I had projects on helicopter control of damaged helicopters, helicopter going to disturbances, flight and fire control system for Rockwell that was developed. I developed two-fifths of it was my doctoral dissertation. Maneuver prediction for multiple pursuers, countermeasures for air combat, real-time system identification as you're moving, flying for an F-15 plane with McDonnell Douglas and NASA, anti-skid braking systems, all kinds of stuff. And then mobility analysis, logistic networks for US DoD, basically all the Department of Defense, both the Air Force and the Joint Commands, mostly on humanitarian side. How do you do medical evacuation? How do you save patients? How do you get people quickly to the help they need? So this idea of dynamical systems, and then working on that on the civilian side before I moved to EPRI, on intelligent vehicle highway systems, how to minimize, predict choke points and minimize that. So when I moved to EPRI in January of '98, I had those, except physics of the power grid are totally different. The flows on systems are totally different. I've taken all the power courses on undergraduate, graduate school similarly. However, I should note that in the late 70s, 80s, late 80s, power was considered as an old area. It was not considered as a hot, sexy area. Signal processing, chip design, hardware, electronics, etc., VLSI were on the way up. Power, even controls, because of end of the defense, collapse of Soviet Union, were on the way down. However, it underpins everything else we do, interestingly.
Yeah, that's an interesting transition, because the ideas of combat and military, a lot from my zero experience, some of it has to do with attack surface and vulnerabilities, and the grid is one of the largest attack surfaces that you can have as a nation. What was it like trying to pitch the idea of having a smarter grid? Because I've actually been thinking about this, reading more about what you do, is that the one problem that would seems to arise when we're looking for a smart grid. We have so many gains that we get from a smart grid, so many gains in efficiency and redundancy and microgrids, but we also now open ourselves up to possibly a bigger attack surface. So how do you reconcile those two opposing problems?
Very well said. Actually, I will send you, if you don't mind, a link to the very first presentation a week after I joined Electric Power Research Institute. I gave to the Research Advisory Council at EPRI. This was 24 years ago. And this was the founding idea. Before that, there were so many advances on utility communication architecture, common information model, so many things that when we look back, it's so many pioneering people had worked in that area. But allow me to send that really quick to everybody, and I will send a link. If you open that, the whole area was with security built in as a design criteria, not so much glued on as an afterthought. You put in security as a design, as part of both the design of the devices, electronics, these advanced controls, power electronics, as well as in the communication protocols. And then layered defense, in the sense that Department of Defense calls it defense in depth, that you have, before even you get into SCADA, or before you get into PMU systems, or before you get into smart meter, you have to go through other layers. Of course, each one comes through assessing dynamic risk, and each one comes at a cost benefit. So to cut a long story short, it is design. So design of the whole system. And actually in that presentation, if you would please take a look at the audience, if they can get that, they will see that there was quite a bit of that advanced thinking on how to make the system not only smarter and more resilient, but also more secure by design, and operation of the system more secure as well, so that we don't get close to the edge of collapse or instability. So power system security, cyber security, and physical security all combined.
How would you summarize the trajectory of how things have progressed and how they need to progress? Like, what are some of the basic steps that you would be able to convey to, still in school engineering students that have happened and need to happen if we want to achieve the best possible system that we could have?
I would say begin with listening to kind of the factors, multiple forces. One is in the societal need in terms of our lifetime, increasingly digital society, that we need precise, especially for applications that are high end for digital equipment. That's one. Secondly, think about what's the potential for existing technology. So synthesis, utilization of what it is, and then look at what is called foresight. Look at evolving needs 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and work with other people who can do a little bit of, how should I say, forecasting, strategic planning, futuring. Of what are the things that we may not even think about right now? Who would have known 25 years ago we would all have a smartphone in our hands and we would do that? You could see it in the sense that there was, when Marty Cooper from Marriott in New York City, he worked at Motorola at the time, chief engineer there, and he called the head of the Bell Labs research and called him on a portable phone in 1984. You could see what may come. But most people are so busy, and it's hard to justify longer term research and development, longer term strategy. That's where universities, labs, projects that you do within labs, within national labs, within government labs, industry labs, and university collaboration across the world comes in handy. Imagine, be bold, not arrogant, but bold, and think about what the future, basically engineering in a sense, is a way to advance the whole civilization in a responsible way. For example, transportation, rapid transportation is overcoming the tyranny of distance. Lighting, refrigeration, all that. Lighting's particular, overcoming the tyranny of darkness. Refrigeration, spoilage. Modern medicine, combined with a lot of engineering, medical devices, etc., overcoming the curse of diseases that in the old days they used to think that it is caused by some demon. So we are problem solvers. Think about problems that, or opportunities instead of problems that may be there. Read a lot also. Read a diverse fields from MIT publications within area called the Technology Review, to economists, to McKinsey, to everywhere. Just be a sponge to absorb. Do not just read one thing. Read history. Read about literature. Read about culture. Travel a lot. When you travel, and you have done that, amazing, really great journeys that you have had. You learn so much by just observing. And take notes. At the end of the day, reflect, have a cup of tea. Here is tea to you and the colleagues. Journal. What did you observe? What did you learn from that? Are there any areas that really you had an aha moment?
You spoke about solving problems as one of the base things that an engineer does. As kind of a specific example, when you think back, are there certain early problems, like specific examples that you remember solving that really stick out as little mini victories that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think as a sophomore, one of our problems was if a gardener has a watering hose, and you have certain pressure on the hose itself that the gardener is holding, and you have pressure of the water coming out. How would the rest of the garden hose, given the length given the weight, how would it vibrate? So water is coming out. How would it sneak around? Open-ended problem in physics.
Yeah.
In physics, and it was actually a final exam question. So
Interesting.
you have to make a lot of assumptions.
So many things come to mind because it'd be like it would have to do with like the initial state of the hose and what like geometry is it coiled and in which way, because it can probably have some stable states that are hard for it to get out of, like if it gets kinked and all this stuff. It's incredibly complex.
Or one of the simplest projects in controls was if you have you have a magnetic maglev train. Because you want to keep the separation between the train cart and the rail at a certain space. How much electricity do you put, which is the right-hand rule, for it to induce an electromagnetic field to keep the gap within 5 centimeters? And then how do you keep the control going? That was the very first week of the course, actually. And we didn't have MATLAB back then. We didn't have any of these things. So we had to write the code ourselves to control it. So there were a lot of neat things like that. You see, when I say we're happy geeks on missions, that's what I mean. We become mission specialists, and at some level, our missions become more synthesis, integration, collaboration with others.
And I really think that a lot of us being so young, we're about to have, and hopefully not anything devastating, but we're about to have some failures. We will inevitably have some failures. And I find it really wonderful to hear about people's failures as much as their successes. And I was wondering if there's anything that stands out to you as a turning point, a time that you failed that you would like to share with us.
I've had many. Don't let anybody tell you that you fail more often than you succeed. In my case, there were so many, times that I had to regroup back, step back after my initial secondary, tertiary attempt had not been successful either in my research or in my problem solving or resource constraint or my own initial not lack of understanding of the real problem. You know, we listen to our customer. We think we understand the problem. And we're excited because we all want to just jump at the solution. And that often causes that lack of reflection, lack of keep asking the question. So part of it also is because we don't know any better. Part of it may be also pride, false pride. We don't want to look to them as ignorant. So we don't want to ask too many questions. So not understanding problem that they're asking, spending 2-3 weeks on something that you thought is what they're asking, coming back to them with a solution, and they tell you, no, that's not what I was looking for. You know how many times that happened to me? I would say up to my early to mid-20s, many times. Even now, I slow myself down. Whenever I try to understand, to listen to understand, not listen to respond. You know how sometimes we jump in, we're holding our breath. As soon as the person pauses, even though they may not intend to stop their thinking, they're just thinking, we jump in. And that's the problem often. So I think lack of really good listening and then taking the real problem they're worried about and coming up with a valid abstraction and knowing what the limitation of the abstractions are, putting all those limitations, assumptions up front, and then one by one, relaxing those assumptions, becoming a harder problem. So start simple with a linear model, let's say, and slowly introduce the non-linearities. They develop, maybe it has also data. Sometimes I collected data that was irrelevant. And how do you know what you're collecting, sensor data that you're collecting is actually what you're going to need? So I would say a lot of it comes from cultivating an inner peace, inner quiet, to really listen and understand before you attempt to solve the problem.
That's incredible. That's really, really nice. I could just picture so many, in many different fields, people the client doesn't sometimes know what they don't know. And so they're only telling you the problem that as they've encountered it. And they only have the data that they have. And so if they tell you this is my problem and you take their word for it and you go off on a 3-week mission to solve the problem, you've possibly just gone down a huge waste of time on the wrong path. So listening and asking questions is crucial.
Well put. Also, you lose confidence in yourself. And they lose also, some of them, if they are really not looking to mentor you, to develop you, may also have the same feeling. But I would say just know that we all make mistakes. We learn from those. Don't even call them mistakes. The good thing is in North America, you know, look at entrepreneurs, how many false starts they have, how many startups fail. Only a very small, less than 2-3% of startups succeed.
Mm-hmm.
So you do it, you learn, in a sense, like shoot then aim. Shoot then aim in some ways, at least in your own head, in your own on your own, if you will, brainstorming, ideation, brain mapping. Do it, come up with many ideas, put it through the filters which are realistic, and then, but initially to know the real problem is huge.
So you've worked at some places that cultivate really good culture and really good mindsets and thoughtfulness. You've worked for different groups and been board members and chairmen for places like the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Idaho National Labs, the National Academy of Sciences. What makes those organizations good, and can you distill down a commonality that you've noticed between organizations that makes them good?
Thank you, Clinton. Yeah, I'm still learning. I would say having a bigger mission much bigger than yourself or individual interest, a goal, a mission that is bigger than everybody, bigger than, and then service to a greater goal that was upfront, the why of what we are doing, service oriented, humility as part of that, and knowing that a lot of people that are there, they are your really not only your colleagues, not only your friends, but they're mentors. You can learn from them at every level. And what you do is for a greater good. You work on reliability of a major part of the whole North American interconnection, or you work on an area of cybersecurity within Idaho National Labs, or you work in an area within the Oak Ridge on computational methods, on supercomputers to solve realistically impossible hard problems. So you focus on the mission, you focus on that bigger problem, and it's almost like a goal that pulls everybody to that direction. And you check your ego at the door. You check your ego at the door. You cultivate a quiet mind, and you study with humility these areas, issues, challenges, problems, and the road ahead that you want to shape together. And it's together, really. It's not an individual. There's no longer that person on top of a hill or mountain pointing in a direction. It's a group activity that requires wholesome participation and respect, mutual respect at all levels.
I've definitely, the curtain has been lifted since I've gone to school now. Kind of the mystery behind engineering and science and research, and that I totally understand what you're saying, because I more and more realize how, like, there are so many incredibly talented specialists that these systems cannot operate on one person's back. Like, you need to work as a team, because everyone has you need specialized people in this world. It's incredible.
And you listen to them and you make their problem your problem. And you really handle that issue, that problem with great care and with great commitment to solve. And sometimes you're not going to succeed, but you do your best in every way to solve the problem together for the greater organization or the cause you're working on.
We have one question from Penty. I think the Penty Alto. I hope you're unmuted. Go ahead if you are.
Hi, this has been very pleasant. I really enjoyed this. Two comments. The first, back in the mid-'70s, there was a lot of activity in the Massachusetts area about solar energy, particularly at the University of Massachusetts. We had a whole bunch of presentations, and this was all, of course, solar thermal at that time. So a group of us that were part of it set up an association to look at all of that stuff as best we could, and we held a series of conferences over a number of years. And I remember one particularly that we held, I think, at Worcester, and the requirements were that you had actually built it, and it failed. We didn't want to get theory. We didn't want to get a lot of fun out of it otherwise. The second item, again in the 70s, there was quite a bit of work going on by a small group of folks at MIT looking at homeostatic control of grids. And when these younger folks presented their paper, they were told that they were idiots, that the systems don't work that way. And I'm wondering, looking forward, as we get into more distributed generation, central control in the traditional way is going to be extremely difficult, because not everything is going to be controllable. Would some of those thoughts of the homeostatic grid, where essentially as a participant, either a generator or a consumer, you respond to conditions on the wire at your location, can we come up with a system that would allow for decentralized control of a very substantial grid that has still central generation? Maybe we don't even have frequency control anymore in the traditional sense, because we've got inverters now making the power. How do we control a system like that and retain the stability, balancing, and a few of I think the jargon is ancillary services that we're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Alto. I mean this, such an amazing question. There's so much wisdom, the way you asked the question, the way you posed it. I think I know of your work. I think you are at the Carnegie Endowment, or Carnegie Council. I've read your work on I think you did good energy analysis, pinch point, what actually Chauncey Star and I we call pinch points. You have used that. The whole holistic systems approach to that. I think I've seen your work, and I'm grateful that you're here. So regarding two things, the solar, as you remember, and heat pumps had potential, but it was ahead of its time. It was partially thanks to President Carter's foresight as the youngest nuclear submarine commander, nuclear engineer, only second engineer in the history of US to become president of the US. And also if you go to many parts of the West Coast, California, you see these wonderful old inefficient wind turbines that were way ahead of its time. And the backlash that it caused in the 80s was actually put the whole industry behind. And we can talk about that. It actually, Mr. Alto knows it better than I do. Countries in Europe that did it in a more systematic way advanced it. There is solar, geothermal, wind, other areas. They advanced it even better than us, including Finland, by the way. People think of Finland as Nokia, but it's much more than that. There's so much advances, Denmark, Germany, we can go through. So coming back to your main question, yes, the layers, we have analyzed this since 98 and actually post 9/11. What would the most resilient, decentralized architecture? It would be actually very similar to a human, the way brain is built. We simulated it, 1.6 million simulations for the Eastern interconnection, about 1.1 for the Western interconnection, which is two states, two provinces in Canada, 11 Western states, and about 600 plus thousand simulations. And at every simulation, we would improve the system architecture that would satisfy resilience, security, stability, resilience, ability to handle punch, etc. And I published non-classified versions of it. There are 3 layers. At the lowest layer, it's similar to our kind of like the reptilian brain, works in the order of tens to hundreds of fraction of a second, maybe 10 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds. If you're going through PMUs, going all the way to one of the low Earth orbit satellites is 12 milliseconds coming back. So you can do it roughly in every 40 to 100 millisecond cycle. That's a fast response. It really is more of a trigger that does, but it coordinates at the same time at the next level, which is the coordination level in the order of hundreds of those milliseconds to a few seconds to make sure what you do locally does not destabilize, does not create over voltages, etc. in other parts of the system. Then on the top layer, which is that executive function, that's the part that does more truth maintenance, prediction, day ahead, even season ahead prediction. And you optimize these layers. And we have even done work on knocking out parts of that, disabling, trying to totally take out a layer or many parts of each layer. It's the command and control. Exactly, that's what we are doing. If you take it out, can the system survive? And the answer is yes. However, you need 3 things. You need a stronger backbone within the North American grid. And that requires adding about 42,000 miles of high voltage line, mostly DC. What China has done, Siemens and China have done that, 800 kV to connect those major interconnections through the same existing rights of way. By doing that, 42,000 miles is about 9% increase in the high voltage line within the whole North American interconnection. That cost about $2 million a mile, so about $84 billion. Can be done over 10 years, $8.5 billion a year. That would also enable 40% of wind in North America, 40% of electricity in North America can come from wind. The fact that the DC also is a lot more controllable and switchable. That's one. Microgrids, exactly what you said, decentralized at the local level, whether it's a campus, industrial park, microgrid with the technologies that we have worked on, precisely that, to make it as efficient as using local resources as much as possible, buying and selling to other interconnections that are connected to that, and making it at that level resilient, so it can quickly isolate if it senses local disturbances that may destabilize the larger body, and protect it at the same time from disturbances coming in. Third, smart grid, overlay of exactly what we talked about on top of that. I'd be happy if you contact me, I'd be happy to send the links to those. amin@umn.edu, I'm at your service. But I hope that made sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're looking in the same directions in many cases. The issue is, of course, the technical component of it that we've talked about, and then the overlay of an economic component that allows for trading and resources where they're available, when they're available.
Precisely.
How much do we need transmission? Where do we need the transmission? And at the other extreme, can we do without? How much could we do with rooftop, in the cellar kinds of activities? And many different ways to approach things.
Mr.
Thank you
Alto,
again.
I'm so honored and grateful that you chimed in and brought us that wisdom too, and you actually asked the perfect segue question that was already on my mind. I was wanted to know what is the technological, the nearest or the most important technological hurdle that you see, like the lowest hanging fruit, and what is the regulatory hurdle that is also holding this back?
These are exactly the 3 areas we talked about. Stronger backbone for the grid, at the same time more of a distributed microgrids and distributed storage, generation, etc. Of course, with minimum carbon, 0 carbon footprint at that, and then smart grid overlay over the whole thing, that command, control, computation, and communication for intelligence on top of it. However, policy has not been supportive of that transformation. If you look at it, even on that very first work that I presented, and I had the privilege of creating that partnership between EPRI and Department of Defense. That was 24 years ago. If you had asked all of us, funded 106 professors, over 240 grad students, postdocs in 28 universities that went through a very highly selective selection process, 10-member board, 5 by Department of Defense appointed, 5 by EPRI, still the technologies we extracted from that, we transitions, there's so much more potential in that area, in the area of understanding. By the way, that wasn't just electric power grid. In Department of Defense, they called it network-centric objective force, which is the network-centric warfare. But this was the base to understand networks and how to enable warfighters to be part of that resilient, forward-looking projection, precursor detection force. For us, was interdependent, complex, interactive networks. That is electricity and power, energy, oil and gas, water, transportation, and logistics to transport them. The logistic problems you're having now, we had interestingly assessed that. What would happen if coal is taken out, if transformers are not available, if this happens, that happens. Then on top of it, financial systems that you heard, we just briefly talked about, what market mechanisms would destabilize the grid, what market mechanisms would enhance the reliability and openness for trade in the grid. And then finally, we had the environmental layer, and that area was actually, ironically, was not that much funded at the time, but we had that, how to do pricing of emissions, pricing of all the greenhouse gases and so on, and assessment of that. So I would say a lot of it is policy dependent. We live, and also the fact that this in United States is so segmented. In US, there are over 3,000 stakeholder organizations when it comes to electricity. Building partnership, building consensus, building a coherent, sound, evidence-based, science, engineering-based approach, but guiding policy based on that science and engineering and data is often hard. It becomes political very fast. And by political, I mean, the practical definition of political, I mean, who gets what, how much they get, and when they get it. So sadly, that's the thing. Competition for resources sometimes are too narrowly focused on right now, this quarter, this year, rather than more strategic long term. That has been the problem all along. So there should be a better way to fund, to enable this transformation in a collaborative way among utilities, among government, among all the research labs and universities. It's possible, it's doable, and it behooves us to actually do that. The thing is not to wait for others to do it, not to wait for policy to catch up, but actually do it and get involved. As engineers, actually Hasala created a series of dialogues on why should engineers get involved in educated, informed policy formation. So giving credit to the great, and he has all the links, you have all the links that we talked, become an advocate for, sometimes we don't know, and we are honest about it. Another advice, if we don't know something, when we stand in front of people, they ask the question, the best thing to do is to be honest. Many people don't do that. We just can't say, I don't know, we don't know that. To find the answer, these are the things we need to look into. And then follow up, take that part which is unknown and make a really good study out of it. You know, I put money on the table years ago, 22 years ago, for something which became very political very fast, and we got weird proposals. You know what it was? What's the actual, if you take all the incentives out of all the fuels, what's the levelized actual cost of all the fuels that we use, from oil and gas, coal, etc. Subsidies are often hard to do. So we were getting proposals from interest groups that really wanted to push their agenda. But how do you really honestly put it in a way which is on the same level playing ground? And then how do you choose an area that can help advance progress that uses the best of those resources in the location, local area grid, microgrid that is available. Southeastern part of US for the foreseeable future will remain a nuclear area. Southern Company, others are nuclear, there are resources there. But is that the same in the Southwest, in the South? In Canada, Canada with all the wealth of wind, all the wealth of oil, sand, etc. What's the future for energy? And I know most of it is on the border with the United States, but what can we do in this interconnected system to transition it in a responsible, ethical way based on evidence? And if we make mistake every 3 years, every 5 years, we have to assess what did it do. That's another thing. It's very hard to do course correction. Once people have embedded interest in something, you
Right.
want to assess that, do course correction. Nobody wants to change.
Right. And so it seems like a lot of the technological engineering has lots of momentum and a lot of great minds behind it. But I notice in the news and in education and things that we learn, it seems like a lot of it runs up against policy and regulatory hurdles. And so if you and culture, and so if you were in a congressperson's office, what are some of the things you have 3 minutes of their time for their elevator pitch? They're super busy. They're like, should I care? Why should I care? I'm fine. The utilities seem to be thriving. Let's leave them alone. What is the pitch for a different manifestation of the grid?
Great question. We should care about economic growth, environmental stewardship, job creation, part of economic growth, workforce, talent development that would enable us to have a more intelligent approach to our energy resources. The way I would share with them would not even be technical. My 30-second pitch would be hunter-gatherers, with everything they did, they used about 2,500 calories of energy per day. 2,500. And they would drill holes, move on to the next hole, exhaust the resources, etc. Agrarian society used about 10,000 calories per person per day. Modern society depends. If you're living in a third world country, probably about 50,000 calories, including all the iPhone, etc., or telephones, up to those of us who fly a lot, 650,000 calories a day. So wow. 2,500, 10,000, somewhere between 50,000, 60,000 to 650,000. However, our approach is still the same as hunter-gatherers. We drill holes, exhaust the resources of that hole, we move on to the next hole. And in the process of doing that, we leave a lot of pain, a lot of things for future generations to clean up after us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And all the things you listed before that are just it's so much of it comes up against politics, it seems, at the end. At the end of the line, it has to get passed by government, which holds a lot of the initiative and funding and power to make these things happen.
Exactly. And please don't think it is a dirty word to get involved in policy making.
Yeah.
You hear this word a lot. It's like sausage making. That so many things come, by the time they mix it up and comes out, it's not exactly what you had planned. It's not as lean, as efficient as you had hoped. But if you look at the Energy Policy Act of 2007 that Congress passed, the two things of why smart grid became the law of the land are really illuminated. They're really illuminating. They're really smart. And it's well done, except back then they only put $50 million for NIST to figure out interoperability standards. So it was a small, humble beginning, and we can do better. It's a partnership between all of us at the end of the day. So I would say to the congressional staffers and so on, and I've had the privilege of doing that on behalf of IEEE USA, American with American societies of mechanical engineers and others. And the message has been listening to them first and putting it in a very short 1 or 2 pages that they can really see the value, economic, job creation, empowerment, infrastructure, that for every dollar that during that part of the smart grid innovation projects that went into smart grid, 2.4 million from the federal government in the US, 3.8 from the private sector billion. For every dollar that went to it, it generated 2.8 to $6.2 in long-term economic activity, job creation, etc. Patents in smart grid are the fastest growing income generators than medical devices, than hardware, than other areas. It's interesting. And jobs. So it's not just money, it's about advancing progress in an ethical way. Why should we tolerate a system that generation from coal is only about 35% efficient? Transmission and distribution is about 90 to 92% efficient, unless you live in a developing part of the world that is a lot of theft. And then the incandescent lighting is only 3 to 5% efficient. So you take 0.35 times 0.92 times 0.05, efficiency ends up being 1.6%. Why should we put up with a system whose efficiency is 1.6%? Doesn't make sense.
No.
You're wasting 98.4% of energy that took millions of years to create that reserve of energy where it is. So save it for future generations. Another one, some folks who are they're motivated by religious values. I would say, what's the ethical choice? How would you like to live this earth for your children, grandchildren? How did you inherit it? And how do you want to leave it there? There was a congressman from certain state that was all about coal. And he was at a CEO gathering that I was part of it about 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago. And at the end of it, I didn't want to challenge him in public. So I went to him and his staff and said, sir, you are all pushing for coal. I know you need that for your state. However, I told him that 98.4%. He didn't know that. He didn't.
Yeah.
And then I told him also, emission-wise, to do carbon capture, you're going to lose 1/3 of that efficiency to do carbon capture.
Yeah.
Your utility only has efficiency of about 25%. Is this the best use of the God-given resources under your feet? Is the best resources are the minerals and raw material that's stored under our feet? Or is it in our hearts, in our souls, and in our minds? What is your best resources in your state?
The people.
The people.
Yeah.
The people are the highest resources, best resources we can ever train and develop. People forget that. They think they should be like going drilling, finishing it up, exhausting it, and moving on to the next. No, develop your people. Develop the culture. As Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I add to it, and it eats technology for lunch and eats everything else for dinner. If you don't have the right culture conducive to progress, to honesty, to ethics, everything is gone.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have to ask you, because, and this is slightly off topic, but it's been I've been wondering, and you're the perfect person to ask, how do failures manifest in a decentralized smart grid? We've all seen modern and pre-modern blackouts. We understand how blackouts roll through a system and how they increase load on the next system, and it cascades, and but what if they happen? What is the failure mode of a smart grid, decentralized grid?
Great question, Clinton. It depends what's hitting it. If it is a natural disaster, hurricane, earthquake, wide area disturbance, destruction. So the hurricane has, let's say, a 10-mile radius that destroys everything on that path, or it's a huge storm that destroys everything, a tornado. There is no choice. What smart grid does, you have proactive, predictive ability to isolate from that disturbance, that physical destruction, Hurricane Sandy, all of it we have assessed that. You cannot really control, unfortunately, at that level, this physical destruction. But you protect, you quarantine the rest of the system so it doesn't become a cascading phenomenon like what happened in 2003 and later on. Number one. for physical. Cyber, it has security built in at the chip. How many of our chips come from what is called trusted foundries? None. Only Department of Defense, NSA, other agencies have that. Not every chip has to be that, but if you're running critical infrastructures on a chips that we know comes from foundries, etc., that we can easily put stuff on it. Number one, communication protocols are really the same as similar to the internet. They can be hacked, etc. Another level of vulnerability, endpoint devices, substations, meters, etc. There was always a chance, without going into sensitive details, post 9/11, by that Sunday after 9/11, a piles of report this tall saying we're bulletproof. This was post Y2K analysis that we had asked the utilities, please let us know what we can do to safeguard you. And CEOs of utilities had asked EPRI, are we vulnerable? And if we are, what are we going to do about it? The other side was skies falling. The truth was neither. It depended whom you're going to hit, whom you're going to red team. And we found out organizations that said we're bulletproof, with permission from CEO, from their board, we would go. From their parking lot, we could hack into their operational control systems. From the parking lot. I mean, and that was not that sky's falling. Depends what assets your opponents are willing to go after, how much resources they want to commit to it, what computational power they have. So cyber, physical, can you do physical destruction with cyber? Yes, absolutely. So physical is one, cyber, physical, cyber is another. Also, many times they don't even show they're there. They just plant the Trojan, they plant their stuff there for one day to trigger it. And that is very hard to detect. Middleware especially is very hard to detect. Third is more of a financial risk. Companies, they don't invest in a certain area because they're not sure they're going to recover that area. So smart grid could fail if we do it with that protection layer defense, which I alluded to earlier in mind. At a local area, it can fail at the building level. But if you have correct controls, it would attenuate or it would stop that disturbance in the order of tens of milliseconds to go further. Electrons, imagine how fast electrons would move in 10 milliseconds. So that's the extent of, or 40 milliseconds. And you need a few cycles to stop it. So that's how far the disturbance will propagate. However, to do that, you need sensors, not saturated everywhere, but at critical nodes that can see this wave of tsunami coming, early detection of the tsunami, so they can isolate.
Wow.
This physical destruction, like a corridor is destroyed by hurricane or tornadoes, yeah, you can just isolate. Actually, PJM protected the west and the south by isolating, by segmenting it in 2003. Otherwise, entire northern part of US and Canada would have been blacked out.
Wow.
So smart grid has that foresight, local ability, and ability to isolate quickly, and then at the same time heal, self-heal. And you run through these also, you learn from each one, like a boxer, like a martial artist, from every one of these, you learn how to do better. It has a reinforcement learning loops all over how to do it better.
Yes, that is truly smart. It learns. I mean, there's just so much there. There's so much work to do. If you were just graduating university today, and you could choose a field, and it can't be exactly what you're doing now because that's cheating. But if you could choose again, where would you like to work?
Oh my goodness, I would work, okay, go for your heart, go for your soul, be great at it, be great and don't give up. Be smart, listen to feedback, do course correction. Look, I worked in defense. Defense was not in my heart. But the fact that I had seen a revolution, the fact that oh, Mazen is right. There's a comment. Lawyers are better articulated and louder. True.
Yes.
Us engineers, majority of us are introverts, including me, by the way. Don't let me talk like this fool you. I'm an introvert. My happiest time is with my books, music, cats. That's it. So we were talking about that another time, but true. But learn better than this, Massoud. I mean, articulate your ideas, your thoughts, communication skills. So if I could do it all over again, humanitarian causes, advancing progress, civil liberties, I would say. But as an engineer, as a person who could actually use engineering mindset, problem solving to solve humanity's human rights problems, part of it is because I've seen what well-functioning societies, and it's all relative, can do with human potential, and sadly, what they destroy when that is not there. So I would
And
get into more human rights
mhm.
and civil society, ethics in the civil society, causes that would be more about human condition, more than anything else.
I think that's also noble in the sense that if you're the type of engineer who wants to do something very difficult, it is a very difficult problem. The humanitarian problems around the world are super challenging, and we need the best minds on it. And I think that's a wonderful point. I'm going to read a question from Mohammed Abujube. He says, "Thank you very much for your wisdom and great ideas. I would like to hear your opinion on model-free or data-driven analysis of power systems. Can AI machine learning replace existing model-based analysis? How do you see the future in this field of power systems?" Thank you.
Mohammed, great question. Great question. You're right. Oh my goodness. You're right on target. In December of 2002, at EPRI, we arranged, I created a data-driven control and optimization of the power grid. We had Tennessee Valley Authority, Bonneville Power, about 40, 50 utilities, Honeywell, universities came. And also, I'm part of this large data science initiative. Yes, I would say where you can use laws of physics, first principle, use them to your advantage. So your AI builds on top of, let's say part of it is a hybrid, it's really a hybrid system. Part of it is your basic laws that you already have from first principle, physics, thermodynamics, chemistry. And then on top of it, use the data to create this hybrid system that makes it, customizes it exactly, and that is platform agnostic. It just takes, so physics is platform specific for a particular thing, but on top of it, the data you put in learns from data, and you fine tune it at a point that not, with neural nets, for example, that I worked on from 85 to around 97 on, you can get biased toward a set of data. So don't get biased, but have a way of gaming that, differential games or game theory, to perturb it. So even with your models, don't fall in love with your models, but perturb them, modify them, subject them to beyond stability range. They all work nice when everything is linear.
Right.
Unfortunately, at times that stuff happens, is hit badly. None of those linearity or even non-linearity even apply, and we often do. All of you, I'm so happy for you, because you're at a time that computation, storage, and all of that, you are powering your hands beyond anything before you. So use that, and I agree with you. Use the data on top of the physics-based or first principle-based models, improve them, and apply them, maybe even multi-modeling. This is a model for this. This is the model for that flight envelope. This is this. And then how do I transition? Can I transition from that set of multi-models to this, to this, to this in a stable, smooth fashion? I hope that makes sense.
Yes, they said that is very similar to what they're working on now, and they're really excited. So very, very relevant. That's wonderful.
Let me know. You have my coordinates. Please let me know pro bono. All of you, by the way, pro bono. No need for money. I'm at your service. Anything I can do, I will do. And there is from my old college, I have a advising price list that I applies to you. This is what I work for.
Dumb looks are still free.
I give dumb looks often, so I'm at your service for dumb looks.
Well, we are approaching the end here, I do like to ask every guest the same question towards the end. And if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and bring about one technological or regulatory change that was not limited by physics or cost or time, what solution do you think would be most effective that you would want to implement, technological or regulatory or both?
Great question, hard question. I would say ability to bring positive change together. I know this is just exactly like John Lennon. Imagine. It's like John Lennon's Imagine. If we could really, in a real way, together, make a positive change when it comes to advancing civilization, empowering people, lifting up civilizations in a responsible way, with minimum or no footprint, adverse footprints, but doing it in a way that we can actually course correct, change, modify, and focus on power and energy that underpins everything else. I won't get into civil liberties, I won't get into human rights and all that. That's then on top of that, you can build education, you can build progress, you can build civilization. But energy and power that is ethical, that is available to all, which is not used as a weapon, but is used as an enabler to all.
That is a worthy dream, and I hope that everyone listening today allows themselves to dream like this. We need to think big. We need to aim high, and thinking outside of this field into how it impacts the world is beautiful. And I'm really grateful for your time and energy, and you have a good heart, sir. Thank you very much.
Still a kid. I'm still a geek on a mission and at your service. Even though I turned 60, but I feel like, honestly, in so many ways, a 14-year-old, 12-year-old, a happy geek in the sandbox. So at your service. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
If we had a little post on LinkedIn that we tagged you in and people wanted to continue the conversation there, is that okay?
Please do. LinkedIn actually is the best way to connect and get in touch with me. Absolutely. Email sometimes get lost and it goes to the spam and all that. I may lose the email at amin@umn.edu, but LinkedIn is always there and I can respond to you. Please do. And I am at your service in any capacity pro bono. No need for any money.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to all of my team. That is just, you're incredible. I'm really grateful. That was a great session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Clinton, Hassalo, Shani, Conrad, and other colleagues. Thank you also all the participants and those who are going to watch it afterwards. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you all. We'll see you again next month. Have a great night, everybody.